Welcome to the Master Your Breath podcast. My name is Tom Richter, and today we have a short episode where I give you a couple of suggestions how to improve your breathing during your yoga practice. Now, I practice Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga, I teach it, and I see a lot of students come to me with a really strong breath. So, right? There's a lot of effort, a lot of volume, a lot of emphasis. You can even see usually their chests being all puffed up and a lot of volume that they're breathing in and out. They do have the regularity of the breath, and that's great, but this kind of breathing will create a lot of problems if you keep doing it for months and years in your practice. And I will tell you what to do instead. However, before I say what I would improve on that kind of breathing, I want to say if you have been breathing so far in this way, that's not a big problem, and in fact, it might just have been what you needed. When somebody comes to yoga for the first time and they have no relationship to their breathing, to their body, we actually want them to breathe a little stronger than they would naturally do, because naturally, meaning habitually, they have not been paying attention to it at all. So you almost have to do it a little more to become aware of it. So you do breathe with a little more sound, constricting your epiglottis a lot to create that sound. And you increase the volume, because so far you have breathed maybe with a really small volume, and then you maybe were out of breath, and then you breathe through your mouth, hyperventilating, panting, and patterns like that. So to go from that to really rhythmic breathing, 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, the sound strong enough so you really pay attention to it and you don't lose it, even if you feel some stretch or you have to think about what's the next pose, is great. But then once your practice is established and your breathing pattern is established, then do that breathing pattern, breathe through your nose in and out, but now bring it more down to your diaphragm, pay attention to exhaling passively, and breathe with the same length, meaning maybe 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, but with less volume in those 4 seconds. What will this do to your practice if you breathe in this way? Well, first of all, what brought me to the practice was seeing those practitioners that had been practicing, 20, 30 years, and how effortless they practiced, how light their practice felt when I watched it, how they could stop in mid-air, controlling every single joint in their body through the whole range of movement, how they could jump through, jump back, stay in handstands, press up into handstands. So this amazing combination of flexibility, strength, stamina, focus, all played out together beautifully. And what they all would have said back then when I was learning the practice was, what is the magic behind practicing like that? It's the breath. But it's not a Darth Vader-like breath, but rather a calm, steady breath. Now, what happens when we are doing a really strong epiglottic constriction, really strong sound? We create a lot of tension in our throat, in our jaw, around our ears. We create a lot of microtension around our chest. And when I started doing breathing exercises along with my asana practice, that's exactly the microtension I tried to release through all the tension releasing kriyas. So I was, opening my mouth, I was stretching out my tongue, I was massaging the area around my ears and in my throat, moving my neck. And that created such a different opening in the whole body. So, and you can try that for yourself, if you, as I sometimes do that in my courses, stand up, bend forward and see how far, slowly bend forward and see how far you can go until you feel a stretch in your hamstrings. Then come back up, massage your ears and the area around your ears for 30 seconds. Then go forward again and see if you can go further. Just to show you how a subtle tension that we create around the throat, neck, and face can have a huge effect on how much hamstring flexibility, as an example, you have, how deep you can go into a forward bend. The other thing is, if we are over breathing, we are breathing a lot of volume, we will lower the amount of carbon dioxide, which will create more tension in the nervous system, which will get us into fight or flight, which will tense the muscles and make them stay tense throughout the whole practice, so we cannot release deep onto the poses. What will also happen is that very likely, especially when you are making a puffy chest, that you are actually breathing with your chest, which is the less efficient way of breathing. You want to breathe diaphragmatically. And if you breathe diaphragmatically, then you can draw in the air much more efficiently. And the exhalation can be passive. That's another thing. A lot of people, they come and they learn about bandhas, that they have to engage the pelvic floor, engage the lower belly, which for them essentially, because practically they cannot separate the upper and lower belly, so they engage the whole abdominal area, and that inhibits their diaphragm from moving. So now they have to breathe high up in the chest. So learn to release the belly first, release your pelvic floor, breathing diaphragmatically and feeling that connection between the pelvic diaphragm moving, the diaphragm, the respiratory diaphragm moving. And with that, the engagement in your core will be much more efficient. The draw of the breath will be much deeper into the lungs, much more efficiently again for gas exchange, and making it possible to breathe with less volume, not running out of breath. When you do that, all of a sudden also your exhalation can be more calm and passive, meaning you inhale, the diaphragm lowers down, and then as you exhale, it's simply a release of the diaphragm, recoiling back up. Now, when I tell that to someone that is struggling in a twist like Mayachasana, I tell them, now inhale, exhale, let the air out passively, and they go from to right? So they really draw out the exhalation. What happens when you do that is that all of a sudden the diaphragm releases, but what is connected to the diaphragm is the psoas muscle, it's the whole abdominal muscle complex, is your pelvic floor, is your pelvis and hip area, because the psoas connects to your hips. So if you do something like Mayachasana C or even D, where one leg is in lotus and the other, and then you twist and your shoulder is going around the other knee, you need this freedom of shoulder doing one thing, diaphragm doing another thing, psoas releasing downwards, hips being in a lotus. And that doesn't work if your diaphragm as the central element is super strong, because all the fascia around it will be also tense when the diaphragm is tense. So as people learn to release the diaphragm during the exhalation and exhale passively, all of a sudden that whole area can release more. But then also, you want a very efficient body alignment. If your diaphragm is tense, that will make your lower back, let's say it creates a tight psoas, because the psoas is connected to your diaphragm. Now that might actually create a different engagement in your pelvis. The same when you lift the chest to make it puffy. It will create a subtle back bend, which will draw your pelvic tilt in one way or another. It will create an engagement in the back. And all of that will affect how open your hips are, how open your hamstrings are, how mobile, in a very subtle way, every single vertebrae along your spine is, which will either prevent you or support deep forward bends and deep back bends. But it goes further. If you are exhaling actively and inhaling with your chest rather than with your diaphragm, then as you exhale using exhalation muscles, and you are using your core stability, or you're creating core stability as well through the exhalation, then that inhibits your diaphragm from moving, but also it engages your lower back muscles. And that might prevent a natural movement in your lower back. So now your hips, your pelvis, and your thoracic spine have to compensate for that, meaning they will not function as freely as they would if you would be breathing nicely. Now, all of this I felt, first I was very unconscious how it happened and why it happened. But when I was learning the Ashtanga sequence, it was very, just go for it, push through the pain. I was in my 20s, so I could go full on. I was injuring myself quite a couple of times. And then I started my breathing practice. And not all of a sudden, I was very diligent in my breathing practice. And every couple of weeks or months, I would feel as if my whole body would release some pressure, release some tension. So all of a sudden, my Kapotasana, without trying more strongly, I could go deeper into Kapotasana. I could go deeper into any back bend. I could go deeper into forward bends. I would feel my hamstrings less. I would recover faster after more fastly after a practice and be, fresh for the next day. Not because I was trying harder or practicing longer, but rather because with the breathing practice, my whole system released things that I was out of habit holding on to. So there's this very strong interplay between your breathing patterns in daily life, the breathing subtlety that you learn to control during your breathing practice, during your pranayama practice, and then putting it into practice when you do your movement practice. For me, Ashtanga practice. But for you, it could also be another movement practice, some vinyasa, hatha yoga practice, or even doing any sports. But the breath really affects all these places. It creates more natural mobility and flexibility. It allows you to stretch less and still go deeper. It creates this more strength because you are engaging your core in a much more efficient way. It creates more stamina because the energy is not used for inefficient engagement and tension holding, but rather just the amount of engagement that is needed. It creates more focus because all of a sudden you're not in this fight or flight mode because of the overbreathing, but rather your nervous system is calming down, your focus is widening and getting more stable. And then you also, in the long run, create a better organ health because when you breathe less but rhythmically through your nose, diaphragmatically, you create a lot of circulation in the whole body because you're not holding on the tension in your abdominal area, squeezing all your vital organs, but rather releasing unnecessary tension. So your organs can move, they can breathe, they have space to move. And because of the higher amount of carbon dioxide, very efficiently they are supplied by oxygen. Because if you have low amounts of oxygen with overbreathing, low amounts of carbon dioxide because of overbreathing, the oxygen is not released into the organs, into the tissues, into the muscles, into your brain. So by breathing less, you will get that lightness, that effortlessness. I hope that helps. If you have any questions about that, let me know. I will go deeper into that in a future episode. You can come to my Mysore at Gaia Yoga Shala in Zagreb if you want, or join my online courses to learn more about this. That's it for today. I wish you a beautiful day, and I will hear you again in the next episode next week.